She bore her sons in her upper chamber in the house of Achilles. 30 ships were their squadron. The Phocians were there, led by Schedius and Epistrophus, the sons of a proud man, iː nobilides. These came from Cyparissus and rocky Python, Chrysa the divine, and Daulis and Panopeus. Others came from Anamoria and Hyampolis, or lived along the noble river Cephisus, or at Iliad, beside the noble springs of Cephisus. 40 black ships were in this command. Their captains kept their lines of battle close to the ocean left. The Locrians were led by the runner Iliás, King Olyus' son, the lesser Ilias, not so big as Telamonium, far smaller indeed. He was quite small and wore a linen corselet, but with spear he excelled all the Hellenes and Achaeans. These men came from Sinos and Oppius and Caliarus, from Bisa and Scaphi and lovely Ogygia, from Tarphi and Thronion, beside the streams of Boagrius. Their captain had 40 black ships of the Locrians, who were settled opposite sacred Euboea. There were the Abantes, breathing fury, from Euboea, who held Colchis and Eretria, and grape-clustered Histiaea, Cerinthus by the sea, and the steep castle of Dios, with those of Charistus and Styra, all led by Elephino Chalcodontiades, a true sprig of Ares, chief of the proud Abantes. His men followed him, quick men with hair grown long behind, spearmen ready and eager to push their ashen pikes, tear the tunics off their enemies' breasts. He had 40 black ships with him. There were the men of Athens, that well-built citadel, the people of great heart Erechtheus. In ancient times he was born out of Mother Earth, and Athena, the daughter of Zeus, nursed him and set him up in Athens, in her own rich temple. There the Athenian lads seek his favor with bulls and goats as the years roll on. These Athenians were led by Menestheus, Petius' son. No mortal man upon this earth was ever his equal in marshalling horses and spearmen. Nestor alone could challenge him, for he was the elder. He commanded 50 black ships. Aeneas from Salamis brought 12 ships, which he ranged beside the Athenian lines. There were the men from Argos and Tiryns with the massive walls, from Hermione and Asini, which hold the deep gulf, from Trojan and Ephione and vine-clad Epidaurus, Achaean lads from Aegina and Masses. These were led by Diomedes, the stout champion, and Sthenelus, the son of famous Capaneus. Third with them was Euryalus, noble as a god, the son of Mecistius Talaeonides. But Diomedes was their commander-in-chief. They had 80 black ships in their squadron. There were the men from Mycenae, that well-built citadel, from rich Corinth and comely Cleone, from Ornai and Arethuria the beautiful, and Sicyon, where Adrastos was king at first, from Hipparesia and steep Gonoessa, from Pellene and Aegion, from all Aegialos and wide Helice. These were led by King Agamemnon Atrides, 100 ships. His men were the most and the best of all, and he was among them himself in bronze armor, proud and conspicuous, because he was the best, and his people the most. There were the men from Lacedaemon, with its wide valley and long ravines, from Pharis and Sparta and dove-haunted Messi, from Brycia and beautiful Ogygia, from Amyclae and Helos, the castle by the sea, from Laius and from Aetolus. They were led by his brother, the stout champion Menelaus, 60 ships. They had their station apart. There he moved among them, confident in his own ardor, inspiring them for war. His dearest wish was to avenge his passion and groanings for Helen's sake. There were the men from Pylos and lovely Arene, and Thryon, the ford of Alpheus, and well-built æ from Cyparisseus and Amphigenia, from Teleus and Hellas and Dorian, where the Muses met Thracian Thamyris and made an end of his singing, on his way from the house of Eurytus at Oechalia. For he avowed with boasts that he would beat the very daughters of Zeus Almighty if they would sing for him. Then they were angry and maimed him, took away his inspired song, and made him forget his harping. These men were led by Gerenian Nestor, who loved horses so well. 90 ships followed him. There were the men from Arcadia, and Selene's lofty hill, beside the tomb of Iphitus, where men fight hand to hand, from Phenios and Orchomenos, with all those flocks of sheep, from Rhipe and Stratia and windy Anispe, from Tegea and lovely Manatea, from Stymphalus and Parasia. These men were led by Prince Agapenor, Ancaeus' son, 60 ships. In each were embarked many Arcadian men, well acquainted with fighting. Their ships were the gift of my lord King Agamemnon himself, well built and fit to traverse the Purple Sea, for seafaring was not their business. There were the men from Buprasium and sunny Elis, all that stretch enclosed by Hermina and Myrsinos on the coast, by the Olenian rock and Elysium. These had 4 captains, each with 10 swift ships and large crews of Epeans. 2 captains were Amphimachus and Thapus, both of Actor's line, sons of Cteartus and of Eurytus. One was the mighty Diores, Amarynceus' son. The 4th was the noble Polyxenos, the son of my lord Agasthenes, Augeas' son. There were the men from Dulichium, and the sacred Echini, 2 islands which lie opposite Elis across the sea. These were led by Meges Phyleides, like a new god of war. Phyleus, his father, the famous horsemaster whom Zeus loved, had passed over to Dulichium when he quarreled with his father. Meges had 40 black ships. But Odysseus led the proud Cephallenians, who were settled in Ithaca, and Neraton with its quivering trees, in Crocyllia and rugged Aegilyptus, at Zacynthus and in Samos, all about, and they held the mainland opposite these islands. These were all under Odysseus, a man wise with the wisdom of Zeus himself. 12 ships he had, all with vermilion cheeks. The Aetolians were led by Thoas, Andremus' son, those who came from Puron and Olenus and Pellene, from Chalcas by the seashore and rocky Calydon. For the sons of proud Aeneas were no more, nor he himself, and red-headed Meleagros was dead, whose lot had been to rule over the Aetolians. Thoas had 40 black ships. The Cretans were led by Idomeneus, the famous spearman. They came from Knossos and Gortys, the walled city, from Lyctus and Miletus and chalk-white Lycastos, from Phaestus and Rhytion, flourishing cities both, and others from the 100 cities of Crete. These were led by Idomeneus the spearman and Meriones, one like death-dealing Enyalius in person. They had 80 black ships under them. Tlepolemus, a great handsome man and a son of Heracles, brought out of Rhodes 9 ships of sturdy Rhodians, who came from the 3 districts of Rhodes, Lindos, Ialissos, and chalk-white Chimera. Their leader, Tlepolemus, was a famous spearman. His mother was Astyochea, whom Heracles brought out of Ephyra, from the river Selleis, after he sacked many cities of lusty young fighting men. But as soon as Tlepolemus grew up, he killed his father's uncle Lysimnius, the sprig of Ares, who was then growing old. At once he built ships and gathered a great company, and took flight over the sea, for he had been threatened by the other son and the grandson of his puissant father. He suffered much on his travels, but came at last to Rhodes. There his people settled in 3 tribal divisions. They were dear to Zeus, the lord of both gods and men, and he poured out infinite wealth upon them. Nireus, again from Cyme, brought 3 ships. Nireus, the son of radiant Aglaea and gracious Charopos. Nireus, the handsomest man of all the host before Troy, next to the admirable Achilles, but he was feeble, and few followed him. There were the men from Nisyrus and Crapathus and Cassos, from Kos, the city of Eurypolis, and the Calydnian islands. These again were led by Pheidipus and Antiphos, 2 sons of King Thessalus, whose father was Heracles. They had a squadron of 30 ships. Now again there were those from Pelasgian Argos, from Alos and Alope and Trechis, from Phthia and Hellas, the land of lovely women. These were named Myrmidons and Hellenes and Achaeans. There were 50 ships of these led by Achilles. But these had no mind for the din of battle when there was no one to lead them to their place, for Prince Achilles lay idle beside the ships, angry for the loss of beautiful Briseis, whom he had chosen out of Lyrnessus after a hard fight. When he had destroyed Lyrnessus and the walls of Thebe, and cut down Mynes and Epistrophus, the 2 warlike sons of King Euenus Lepeiades, that is why he lay idle in sorrow. But he was soon to rise up again. There were the men from Philice, and flowery Pyrasus, the precinct of Demeter, from Iton, mother of sheep, from Antron by the seashore, and Ptilius in the grassy meadows. These again had been led by Protesilaus the warrior while he yet lived. But by that time he was deep in the black earth. His wife was left in Philice, tearing her 2 cheeks for woe, with the house only half finished. He was killed by a Dardanian as he leapt ashore first of all the Achaeans. Yet the men were not leaderless, though they missed their leader, but they were taken in charge by Podarces, a true sprig of Ares, son of Iphicos Philicides, the master of many flocks, own brother to proud Protesilaus, but younger. Protesilaus was older and a better man of war, but the men did not want a leader, though they missed the good man they had lost. He had 40 black ships in his squadron. There were the men from Pheræ beside the Bebian lake, from Boibe and Glaphyre, and well-built Iolcus. These, in 11 ships, were led by Eumelos, the beloved son of Admetus, whose mother was the noble Alcestis, most lovely of Peleus's daughters. There were the men from Methone and Thaumacia, from Melibea and rugged Olizon, led by the master bowman Philoctetes in 7 ships. 50 oarsmen were in each ship, all expert with the bow. But Philoctetes lay in an island, suffering dreadful pain in sacred Lemnos, where they had left him behind, tormented by a horrible wound from a poisonous serpent. There he lay in suffering. But the Argives were soon to remember my lord Philoctetes. Nor were his men leaderless, though they missed their leader, but they were taken in charge by Medon, the bastard son of Oileus and Rhene. There were the men from Tricca and Ithome amid the hills, and from Ikalia, the city of Eurytos. These were led by the 2 sons of Asclepius, Podalirius and Macedon, good physicians both. Their squadron was 30 ships. There were the men from Omenius, and from the fountain Hipporia, and from Asterion and the white crags of Titanus, led by Eurypylus, the fine son of Euaemon. 40 black ships were his. There were the men from Argissa, and Geotoni, from Orthi and Elone and white Oloosson. These were led by Polypoetes, that trusty fighter, the son of Pirithous, whose father was Zeus immortal. His mother, Hippodamia, conceived him on that very day when Pirithous punished the shaggy monsters when he drove them out of Ilion, away to the Ithrices. He was not alone. With him was Leontios, that true sprig of Ares, the son of proud Coronis Kenneades, and they had 40 black ships. Grunios from Cyphus had 40 black ships. He led the Eneines and the trusty Pereboi, who came from cold, stormy Dodona, and from the farms beside the delightful Teresios, which pours his flood of water into Peneus. The water does not mix with the silver eddies of Peneus, but runs above it like olive oil, for it is a rivulet of Styx, that awful oath. The Magnesians were led by Protheus the runner, son of Teuthredon, those from the banks of Peneus and from leaf-shaking Pelion. 40 black ships were with him. These were the leaders and the lords of the Danaans. But which was the best of these? Best among horses and best among men in all the Achaean host? Horses the best by far were those of Pheretyades, which Eumelos drove, swift on the foot as birds, of one coat and one age, level as a builder's rule across their backs. Apollo Silverbow bred them in Perea, mares both, bringing with them the terror of war. Of men, the best by far was Telamonian Aias, while Achilles was angry. For Achilles was first of all, and so were the horses which drew the admirable Achilles. But he lay idle beside the ships, enraged against my lord King Agamemnon, and his people on the seashore amused themselves with quoits and javelins and arrows. Their horses stood each near his own car, chomping clover and marsh-grown parsley, while the cars were in the huts of their masters, well wrapped up. And the masters wandered about the camp, longing for their leader out of the fight. So all this host went sweeping over the earth like a conflagration. The ground groaned under their tramp, as when Zeus Thunderer in wrath lashes the ground round about Cepheus, where he lies in Arima. So under their trampling feet the ground loudly groaned, and quickly they passed over the plain. But a messenger came to the Trojans, storm-foot Iris, with a lamentable message from Zeus Almighty. They were in conclave by the city gates, all assembled together, both young and old. Iris came near and spoke to Priam with the voice of his son Polites, who was the Trojan scout. He used to post himself on the barrow of old Aeaetes to watch when the enemy was coming out, and then run back at full speed. Iris made her voice like his and said to Priam, "Sir, you go on talking forever as if we were still at peace, but here is a war upon us, overwhelming war. Indeed, I have been in many battles already, but such a host and so many men I never did see. Like the leaves of the forest or the sands of the seashore, they are coming over the plain to attack our city. Hector, you are the man I want, and this is what you must do. We have many allies about the walls from all parts of the country, and each has his own language. Let each man take charge of his countrymen and tell them where to go." Hector at once dismissed the assembly, and they hurried to arms. All the gates were opened, the men poured out, horse and foot. There was a great uproar. Now there is a steep hillock away in the plain, with a clear space all round, which men call Bataia, but the immortals call it Dancing Meriones Barrow. There the Trojans and allies mustered their ranks. Hector Priamedes commanded the Trojans. He had under his own hand much the larger division of armed spearmen and the best men. The Dardanians were led by Aeneas, son of Anchises. His mother was the divine Aphrodite, who lay with Anchises on the foothills of Mount Ida, goddess with mortal man. With Aeneas were the two sons of Antenor, Archelochus and Acamas, complete warriors both. Those who came from Zelea, under the lowest foot of Ida, and drank the water of the Aesepus, wealthy men and Trojans, were led by Lycon's son Pandarus, who received his bow from Apollo himself. Those who came from Adrasteia, in the land of Episos, from Pityeia and the steep hill of Tyria, were led by Adrastos and Amphios in his linen corselet, two sons of Percosian Merops. He understood divination beyond all others, and he forbade his sons to go to war. But they disobeyed him, since the fate of Black Death drove them on. Those who came from Percote and Practium, from Sestos and Abydos and sunny Arisbe, were led by Asius, Hirticus' son. He came from Arisbe beside the river Iliás, driving great chestnut horses. Hippothous led the bands of Pelasgian spearmen, those who were settled on the rich soil of Larissa. Hippothous and Peleus, that true sprig of Ares, the two sons of the Pelasgian Lethos, Teutomus' son. The Thracians were led by Acamas and Pyroas, all those enclosed by the strong flowing Hellespont. Euphemos was the leader of the Ciconian spearmen. He was the son of Prince Tresinosciades. Pyracmes led the Paeonians with curving bows. He brought them a long way out of Amydon, from the broad river Axios, from Axios, the finest water that runs over the earth. The Paphlagonians were led by hairy Palaemenes from the Enetae, where the wild she-mules are found. They were settled at Citoras and Sisamos, about the river Parthenios, at Chroma and Aegialos and lofty Erythinoi. The Alazones were led by Odios and Epistrophos from Alabe, far away where silver has its birth. The Mycenaeans were led by Chromes and Eunomos, the diviner of birds, but his birds did not save him from Black Death, for he was brought low by the hand of Achilles at the river, when Achilles despoiled other Trojans too. Phorcys led the Frisians, and noble Ascanius from distant Ascania. They were eager to join in the fray. The Meonians were led by Mestles and Antiphos, two sons of Telemenes, born beside the Gygaean lake. They brought the Meonians from their birthplace under Tmoas. Nastes again led the Carians, men of barbarous speech, who came from Miletos and the leafy mountain of Phthaira, from the streams of Meandros and the high peaks of Mycale. Amphimachus and Nastes were their leaders. Nastes and Amphimachus, the fine sons of Nomaion. One came to the war all over gold, like a girl, poor fool. It did not save him from cruel death, but he was brought low by the hands of Achilles at the river, and prudent Achilles carried off the gold. Sarpedon and the admirable Glaucus led the Lycians, out of far-off Lycia, from the eddying Xanthos. Book 3. How Menelaus and Alexandros fought a duel together, and what came of it. And now the two armies advanced, each under its own leaders. The Trojans raised a loud din and clamor like a huge flock of birds. So you may hear cranes honking out of the sky before a storm of rain as they fly with a great noise towards the ocean stream, bringing death and destruction to the pygmy men, and in the early morning they open their flight. But the Achaeans marched in silence, breathing fury shoulder to shoulder with grim determination. The dust rose in clouds under their feet as they marched apace over the plain. as thick as the mist which a south wind spreads over the mountains. Shepherds hate it, the robber likes it better than night. A man can see a stone's throw and no farther.